My name is Celeste. I am 34 years old. Until my father's 65th birthday dinner, I believed the life I had built over the past decade still belonged to me. I was wrong. But I did not find out gently. I found out at a long table set with white linen and good china, surrounded by relatives from 3 different states, while my father stood at the head with a glass of wine and the confidence of a man who has never considered that his decisions might not be his alone to make. My name is Celeste Adeyemi Holt. I hold a master's degree in corporate finance. I have managed investment portfolios for 11 years. I have never asked my father to rescue me or arrange anything on my behalf. He announced in front of 47 people that he had signed my name to a partnership agreement with the Okafor Group, a real estate conglomerate, committing 30% of my firm's equity as collateral for a joint venture he negotiated entirely without my knowledge. He smiled when he said it. He called it a gift. The table applauded. I set my fork down. I folded my hands in my lap. I smiled at my father across the white linen and thought, let him think it is final. I drove home alone that night. Frederick had ridden with his mother Felicia, which told me everything I needed to know about where that car conversation was heading. I took the long route along the river and gave myself 20 minutes of silence before I had to be composed again. By the time I pulled into our driveway, I was composed. What my father had done was not impulsive. Cornelius Adeyemi did not do impulsive things. He was a man who planned in months and years, who moved pieces quietly and announced results publicly, who had spent his career as a property developer making decisions first and explaining them later, usually framing the explanation as generosity. I sat in the car for 3 minutes after the engine stopped, not crying, thinking. The agreement he had signed was not legally binding without my countersignature. I knew this because I had written partnership agreements for over a decade. Whatever document he had presented carried my name but not my authority. Confronting him directly would only warn him that I intended to resist. A man who knew that would move faster to make things irreversible. So I would not confront him. I went inside, made tea, opened my laptop, and began reading everything I could find about the Okafor Group. The birthday gathering extended into a Sunday lunch 2 weeks later, the way things always did in our family, one occasion bleeding into the next, everyone finding reasons to stay close to the warmth of Cornelius Adeyemi's approval. I attended. I dressed well. I smiled at the right moments. Felicia held court at the far end of the garden, surrounded by Frederick's aunts and 2 of my cousins. I had watched Felicia perform this routine for 7 years. She collected significant family news the way some people collected certificates, to display, to establish authority, to remind everyone she knew important things before anyone else. My father was the same way. They found each other irresistible. At one point I watched Cornelius pour Felicia a glass of wine and lean toward her with the ease of 2 people who had been conspiring pleasantly for longer than anyone knew. She laughed at something he said. He looked satisfied. My cousin Adana caught my eye across the garden. She raised her eyebrows slightly. I gave her the smallest shake of my head. Not now. Adana had known me since childhood. She understood that not now meant something specific. Not never. Just not yet. I refilled my own glass and went to compliment my aunt on her dress. Frederick's way of handling difficult things was to become very interested in practical matters. In the weeks after the birthday dinner, he became consumed by our kitchen renovation, suddenly full of opinions about cabinet finishes and countertop materials that had never previously concerned him. He scheduled contractor meetings. He came home with tile samples. It was not quite avoidance. It was strategic displacement, filling available space with noise so the conversation that needed to happen could not find room to begin. On the Thursday of the 2nd week, I waited until he finished explaining the difference between 2 nearly identical shades of white grout, then said calmly, "Frederick, did you know what my father was planning before the dinner?" He set the tile sample down. The pause before he answered was 4 seconds. Counted. He mentioned he was working on something. I didn't know the details. But you knew something. I thought it was just a conversation. I didn't think he would announce it like that. He had the expression of a man who knows he has said something true that is deeply insufficient. All right, I said. I picked up the tile sample. I think the warmer white for the grout. He seemed relieved. I noted his relief carefully and said nothing more that evening. I found the documents on a Wednesday morning. I had not been searching for them. I was working through quarterly reports when I noticed, beneath papers Frederick had left on my home office desk, a document printed on Okafor Group letterhead. I did not touch it immediately. I looked at it the way you look at something when you want to be certain of what you are seeing before you respond. Then I picked it up. It was a summary of the joint venture terms. 2 pages, dense with legal language. My firm's equity contribution was listed as already confirmed. The timeline showed the venture operational within 90 days. There was a section labeled Partner Confirmation with my name typed beneath it, and a signature line that was completely blank. My father had told them the agreement was complete. His own documents showed it was not, which meant Cornelius had either misled them deliberately or expected me to sign without question. I photographed both pages carefully. I returned the document at exactly the angle I had found it. I went back to my quarterly reports. My hands were perfectly steady. I had found the gap. Now I knew exactly how wide it was. Her name was Priscilla. She was my father's younger sister, 61 years old, and she had spent 4 decades watching Cornelius operate with the exhaustion of someone who loves a person deeply and disagrees with almost everything they do. She called on a Friday evening, which was unusual. She said, "I heard what happened at the dinner." I said, "Most people did." She was quiet, then said, "He told your Uncle Desmond you were on board, that you had discussed it privately and were enthusiastic. That is not accurate." "I know, Celeste, what he did was wrong. I want to help if you'll let me." She had a professional relationship with a senior partner at the legal firm the Okafor Group used for joint ventures. Not close, but enough to make a quiet inquiry about the agreement's current status. Thought carefully. Then I said, "I would appreciate that, Aunt Priscilla. I need you to be discreet." She said, "I raised 3 children while living 5 minutes from your father. Discretion is the only way I survived." I wrote her name at the top of a fresh page in my notebook and underlined it once. Some people walk into your corner without being asked. When they do, you write their names down. In the 3rd week after the dinner, I made 3 quiet moves. The first was administrative. I contacted my firm's legal counsel privately, using a personal email account, and requested a formal review of the documents my father had submitted to the Okafor Group. My counsel confirmed what I already knew. The agreement required my signature. She also flagged something I had not fully considered. My father had represented himself as having power of attorney over my business interests. He did not have that. He never had. This was not a misunderstanding. It was a misrepresentation. The second move was financial. I transferred a portion of my personal savings into a separate account unlinked from any joint asset with Frederick. Legal, clean, quiet. Told no one. The third was professional. I requested a meeting with the chair of the Community Investment Board I had served on for 4 years. I had been a background member, contributing without seeking visibility. I told the chair I was ready for a more active role if a position opened. She said one was opening at month's end and would put my name forward. 3 moves. No confrontation. No announcement. The game had begun, and my father did not yet know he was playing. Cornelius called me on a Tuesday with the tone of someone who considers a matter already concluded. He asked whether I had reviewed the partnership summary. He said the Okafor Group needed my countersignature within 2 weeks. I told him I had a few questions. "Of course," he said warmly. "What would you like to know?" I asked when he had filed the power of attorney documentation. A brief silence. "The what?" "The power of attorney that authorized you to represent my business interests in the initial negotiations. I'm reviewing everything carefully, as any responsible business owner would." A longer silence. "Celeste, this was a family arrangement. The formalities. All business arrangements require formalities, Dad. Even family ones. Especially family ones." He shifted smoothly. He said the paperwork was being handled by lawyers and I should not worry about administrative details. He said this was a tremendous opportunity and he had worked hard to create it for me. I thanked him for his efforts and told him I would be in touch. When the call ended, I sat quietly in my office. He now knew I was looking more carefully than he had anticipated. What he did not know was how much I had already found. My daughter's name was Imani. She was 9 years old and watchful in the way children are when they have grown up around adults who speak carefully. On a Saturday morning 3 weeks after the dinner, she found me at the kitchen table with papers spread in front of me and asked what I was working on. I told her I was reviewing documents for my business. She sat down without being invited, very much her way, looked at the papers, then looked at me. "Mummy," she said, "is Grandpa Cornelius in trouble?" Asked why. She considered carefully, as she always did before saying something important. "Because Daddy and Grandma Felicia talk about him when they think I'm not listening. They sound worried. But also like they're trying to make something okay that isn't." I looked at my daughter, 9 years old. "What do you think about Grandpa Cornelius?" "Yes," she said. "I think he loves us. But he sometimes decides things for people without asking them first." I reached across and covered her hand with mine. "That is a very clear way of seeing something," I said. She nodded, asked for breakfast, and I made it. Neither of us said more. But I thought about her words for the rest of that day. The Community Investment Board held its quarterly public forum in the second week of April. Perhaps 80 people in a conference room, not large but attended by people who talked to other people, and what happened there traveled. I presented a 15-minute analysis of a proposed microenterprise funding model for women-owned businesses in underserved districts. I had prepared it over 2 weekends, working after Imani went to bed. It was the tightest work I had produced in years. Not because the audience required it. Because I required it of myself. When I finished, the room was quiet. The board chair asked 2 questions, both of which I answered without hesitation. 3 members followed. A woman in the second row, a senior editor at a regional business publication, asked if she could follow up separately. Said yes. Afterward, near the coffee station, I saw a man I recognized as one of the Okafor Group's regional directors. He had been sitting in the back row. He nodded at me with an expression that was difficult to read but was clearly not indifference. I nodded back and turned to speak with the board chair. My father had told the Okafor Group I was a silent partner. They were beginning to discover I was something else entirely. The family gathering in April was my Uncle Desmond's anniversary lunch. 35 years of marriage, celebrated with the full family attendance these occasions always commanded. Cornelius arrived with the energy of a man convinced everything was proceeding as planned. He had called me twice since our Tuesday conversation, each time pleasant and forward-moving, each time receiving the same measured response from me. At the lunch he told my Uncle Desmond, within my hearing, about the Okafor partnership and what it would mean for the family's business legacy. He spoke as though it were already operational. As though my signature were a formality already completed. 3 cousins heard him say this. My cousin Adana beside me said quietly, "Is that true? Is it done?" "No," I said. "He needs my signature. He has not received it." Adana looked at my father, then back at me. "How long have you known?" "Since the night of the dinner." "Was. Then. What do you need from me?" I told her nothing yet. But there might come a time when I needed a witness, someone who had heard him represent the agreement as complete when it was not. She said, "I heard him just now. I am your witness." I touched her arm and went to congratulate my uncle. Frederick began watching me differently in April. Not with suspicion. With recalibration. The careful attention of a man who has been operating on a set of assumptions and is noticing the ground beneath them may not be as solid as he thought. He saw the separate bank statement on the counter one morning and paused before I picked it up. He noticed my increasing calls with Aunt Priscilla. He noticed I had stopped asking about the kitchen renovation. One evening he said, "You seem very focused lately." I told him I was working on something. "Is it about your father's deal?" It's about my firm, I said. Which is what it has always been about. He was quiet. Then, I think my mother and your father were more involved in planning that announcement than either let on. This was the most direct thing he had said since the dinner. I think so too, I said. He looked at the table. I should have told you when he first mentioned it to me. I did not rush to reassure him. I did not tell him it was fine. I simply said, yes, you should have. And I let that sentence sit in its full weight. He nodded. It was small and late. But it was real. Aunt Priscilla came through in the 3rd week of April. Her contact at the Okafor Group's legal firm had been discreet, and what he shared changed the shape of everything I thought I understood. Cornelius had approached the Okafor Group not in January as I assumed, but in September of the previous year, 4 months before the birthday dinner. He had presented my firm's financials, which he had no legitimate access to, as part of an initial proposal. He told them his daughter had authorized him and that the equity arrangement had her full blessing. He had been building this for 7 months before I knew it existed. Priscilla told me carefully, her voice steady. I thanked her and asked one more question, whether her contact had kept records of the initial conversations. He had. Given what had emerged about the power of attorney misrepresentation, her contact was concerned about his own firm's exposure and had been quietly assembling documentation. I thanked Priscilla and told her she had given me something important. She said, Cornelius is my brother and I love him. But what he did was not love. It was control wearing love's clothing. I wrote that sentence in my notebook. Some things deserve to be recorded even when you are certain you will not forget them. May was the month I built in silence. I finalized my position on the Community Investment Board, announced quietly through internal communications and briefly noted in the regional business publications online section. A single paragraph, nothing dramatic, but findable by anyone who looked. I met 3 times with my legal counsel to prepare a formal response to the Okafor Group's partnership proposal. Not a rejection. A counter-proposal, professionally drafted, financially sound, restructured to remove the unauthorized equity commitment and replace it with terms I had actually reviewed and agreed to. By every measure, it was a better deal than what my father had arranged. I also met with a financial advisor named Dr. Nkechi Obi, recommended by the investment board chair. She assessed my firm's independence and resilience. Her report confirmed what I had always believed. My firm was healthy, well-managed, and required no external equity arrangement to thrive. What my father had offered the Okafor Group had not been a lifeline. It had been a transaction that benefited him. By the end of May I had a legal strategy, a financial assessment, a counter-proposal, and a network of people who understood the situation accurately. Cornelius still believed he was waiting for my signature. The regional business publication ran a feature in the 1st week of June. 6 paragraphs in print, slightly longer online. It covered women in independent financial services and the Community Investment Board's new funding model. My name appeared as the model's architect and as a quote about building sustainable financial structures without over-reliance on external partnership. I had not sought the coverage. The editor from the April forum requested the interview in May. I agreed because the work deserved a wider audience, not because of the timing. But the timing was useful. Cornelius called the afternoon the piece ran. His tone was different, still pleasant on the surface, but with something underneath that had not been there before. A slight tightening. The quality of a man realizing other people are forming impressions of someone he has been trying to define for them. He said he had seen the article and was proud. Thanked him. He said we should sit down soon to finalize the partnership details. I told him I was working on something related and would be in touch within the week. When the call ended I sat quietly. The ground was shifting beneath him. He could feel it moving. He simply could not yet see what was underneath his feet. Cornelius made his largest miscalculation at the end of June. He contacted the Okafor Group directly and told them the delay in receiving my counter-signature was due to what he described as family adjustment to the transition. He told them he was confident the matter would resolve within 30 days, and that they should not pause any operational preparation. The Okafor Group's regional director called my firm's main office line 2 days later to confirm a preliminary site visit to one of our managed properties. My office manager, briefed at my instruction, took detailed notes and forwarded them immediately. I now had documented evidence of my father making representations to a third party on my firm's behalf, without authorization, after I had already put him on notice in April that I was reviewing the agreement carefully. This was no longer a family misunderstanding. This was a pattern of misrepresentation with a paper trail. I forwarded the call notes to my legal counsel. She replied within the hour. 3 sentences. The documentation was significant. We were ready to move when I decided to. I should take my time and choose the right moment. I read her message twice. Then I opened my calendar and looked at the date of the next family gathering. 3 weeks away. Frederick came to my firm office on a Saturday morning in early July. He had visited perhaps 4 times in 7 years of marriage. He called ahead and arrived with coffee, which told me he had been planning what to say long enough to think around it. He sat across my desk and looked at the room, the files, the shelves, the framed firm registration certificate, with the expression of a man seeing something he had never properly examined. Then he said, "My mother knew about the plan from September." "I know," I said. "How long have you known?" "Long enough." He was quiet. Then, "She told me in October your father had something in the works that would benefit both families." I thought it was a social introduction. I did not ask the questions I should have. "Why not?" He looked at the desk. "Because it was easier. And because I thought your father understood what was good for you better than." He stopped. "Better than I did," I finished. He met my eyes. That was wrong. I looked at my husband across the desk of the firm I had built alone. "The question is what you do with that understanding," I said. He said, "Whatever you need. I am with you." In the 2 weeks before the July gathering, I did something requiring considerable discipline. I became, in all visible ways, less certain. I delayed responding to 2 emails my father would have known about through Frederick. I mentioned to Felicia during a Sunday call that I was finding the partnership decision more complex than expected and was still working through it. Felicia's information always reached Cornelius within 24 hours, shaped by her own interpretation, which tended to center whatever made her feel most essential to events. What reached Cornelius, I was confident, was a picture of his daughter becoming overwhelmed, toughening, moving toward compliance. Meanwhile, Aunt Priscilla had quietly spoken to 3 family members attending the July gathering: my Uncle Desmond, my mother's sister Aunt Yatund, and my cousin Adana. She had not told them everything. She had told them enough to ensure they were paying close attention when the time came. My legal counsel had prepared a 1-page summary of the misrepresentation findings in plain language any non-lawyer could follow. My counter-proposal had been sent through my counsel's office and received with what her contact described as significant interest. I was ready. I simply had not yet let anyone see it. The publication ran a follow-up piece in the 2nd week of July. This one was longer. It covered the Community Investment Board's funding model and its first successful deployment, 11 women-owned businesses supported in the first grant cycle. My name was in the headline. There was a photograph of me at the presentation ceremony, standing at a podium, looking like exactly what I was. The Okafor Group's regional director sent a note to my firm's email that same afternoon. Professional and brief. He had seen the coverage and looked forward to speaking with me directly about the counter-proposal his team had received. Note the specific phrase. Speaking with me directly. Not through my father. Not through any intermediary. With me directly. I read the note aloud to Aunt Priscilla over the phone. She said, "He has been dealing with Cornelius for 10 months and has just realized he should have been speaking to you all along." "Yes," I said. "How does that feel?" I thought about it honestly. Not triumphant. Not angry. Something quieter and far more durable than either of those things. "It feels correct," I said. Like something finally being placed in its proper order. she said. 3 days to the gathering. 3 days, I confirmed. My father arrived at my Uncle Desmond's home on the Saturday of the July gathering with the energy of a man who believes he is about to close something. He had called me the previous Thursday and I answered warmly, saying I looked forward to the weekend. This had clearly been interpreted as progress. He arrived smiling, moving through the room with the ease of someone who has decided the hard part is behind him. Standing with my uncle, 2 cousins and Felicia, he said the Okafor partnership was moving into its final stages and the family would see results within the year. He said he had always known how to recognize an opportunity and that the most important thing a father could do was secure his children's futures. My Uncle Desmond caught my eye. I gave him the smallest nod. Felicia said something warm and approving. My father accepted it the way he always did. Adana beside me said quietly, "He really believes it is done." "He does," I said. "Are you ready?" I looked at my father, this man I had loved my whole life, who had never understood that what I needed most was to be left in charge of my own future. "Yes," I said. "I am ready." I did not make a scene. That matters and I want to be clear about it. What I did was have 4 conversations, in sequence with people already in that room. The first was with my Uncle Desmond, who had heard my father describe the partnership as complete on at least 3 occasions. I showed him the Okafor Group's document on my phone, the signature line still blank. I asked whether he had been told any of this when my father spoke to him in December. He had not. The second was with Aunt Yatund, my mother's sister, whose opinion carried weight precisely because she had no stake in my father's business dealings. I gave her the 1-page summary my legal counsel had prepared. She read it in 4 minutes, asked 2 questions, then sat very still. The third was with Frederick's cousin, who worked in corporate law. A brief professional exchange. The fourth was with Adana, who confirmed aloud, in front of 3 family members, what she had heard my father say about the agreement being finalized. She said it clearly. Then she looked directly at him. The room began to rearrange itself around the truth. You could feel it happening the way you feel a tide turn before you can see it. Cornelius noticed what was happening before I spoke to him directly. He was a perceptive man and he could read a room the way he read a property valuation, quickly and with professional attention. He saw Desmond's expression change after we spoke. He saw Yatund reading a single page with the focused stillness of someone encountering information that rearranges what they thought they knew. He crossed the room to me. His face was composed, but his eyes were working harder. "What is this?" he said, quietly. "Just the 2 of us. A conversation we should have had in September," I said. "Or before the birthday dinner, at the very least." "Celeste. Dad." My voice stayed completely level. "I am not angry with you. I need you to understand that. But I need you to understand some other things as well." I told him clearly what I had found. The September approach. The misrepresentation of power of attorney. The documented pattern of representations to the Okafor Group after I had put him on notice. I did not raise my voice. I did not perform. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I was trying to build something for you." "I know," I said. "But it was mine to build. It has always been mine." Frederick's cousin asked Cornelius, in the precise way lawyers ask things, whether he had documentation authorizing him to represent my business interests in the initial negotiations. The room was not silent. People still moved and talked, but the people who mattered were listening. My father said it had been a family arrangement and the formalities were in process. Frederick's cousin said he understood and wanted to flag, as professional concern rather than accusation, that representing a party without documented authorization created potential liability for everyone involved, including the person doing the representing. Felicia said, "This is a family gathering. Surely this is not the place." Aunt Yatund said, "Felicia, please." 2 words, said quietly. They landed like something far heavier. My Uncle Desmond said it was important the family understand the actual situation, and that he was grateful to Celeste for ensuring they did. My father stood in the center of the room with nothing to say. Not from shame, Cornelius was not easily shamed. From recalculation. From the disorientation of a man who has controlled a situation and has just discovered it had its own agenda. I stood beside Frederick, who had taken my hand at some point without either of us marking the moment. 3 things happened in the weeks that followed. The first was that my legal counsel sent the Okafor Group a formal clarification confirming the equity arrangement had been proposed without my authorization, and presenting my counter-proposal as my firm's official position. The regional director responded within 48 hours, accepting the restructured terms. He also sent a personal note saying he wished the conversation had started differently, and was glad it had found proper footing. The second was that my father called me. Not to argue, to ask if we could meet. We had lunch at a restaurant he chose. He spent 20 minutes explaining his intentions. Let him. Then I told him that intentions do not replace consent, love does not license control, and the one thing I had ever needed from him was to see what I had built and be proud without redirecting it. He was quiet a long time. Then, I have always been more afraid of watching you struggle than of overstepping. The overstepping did more damage than any struggle would have. He nodded. We finished lunch. We did not resolve everything, but we began. The third was that Felicia sent a handwritten card, 3 sentences saying she had not understood the full picture and was sorry for her part in it. I am writing this on an August morning, 4 months after my father stood at a birthday table and gave my future away to 47 people who applauded. Imani is at school. Frederick is downstairs. The Okafor partnership is operational under terms I negotiated myself, and the first quarterly report confirmed what I had known. The deal was good. Had always been good. It needed the right person managing it. I did not win by fighting. I did not match my father's control with anger, or his certainty with a performance of my own. I won by doing what I had always done, working carefully, documenting precisely, building quietly, trusting that the truth, properly assembled, does not need to be forced on anyone. Simply becomes impossible to ignore. Cornelius Adeyemi is still my father. He calls on Sundays. He still has opinions about everything. But something has shifted between us, a respect built on reality rather than assumption, which is the only kind that lasts. He thought he was giving me a future. He had no idea I had already built one. And when he announced it as final, I set my fork down, smiled, and thought, let him think it is final. The only person who had ever held my future was me.